The chamber was silent. 47 species had gathered in the orbital station that floated between stars, and not one of them spoke. They all watched the human. At the center of the room, Ambassador Chen Li stood alone under the dome of light. Her dark suit was pressed in perfect. Her face showed no emotion, though her hands were steady at her sides. Above her, the Great Council members sat in their elevated seats, looking down like judges at a trial. Grand Arbiter Kelvash rose from his throne. His insect body clicked and chittered as he moved. His compound eyes reflected the light in 1,000 different colors. When he spoke, his voice came through translators that made it sound cold and final. Humanity has gone too far, Kelvash announced. The weapons you used in the Andromedan War were not just weapons, they were abominations. You did not simply destroy your enemies. You erased them from history itself. You made it so they never existed at all. Chen Li did not flinch. She had expected this. For 3 months the council had debated. For 3 months humanity had defended its actions. The Andromedans had struck first, destroying human colonies without warning. Humanity had responded with weapons that ended the war in a single day, but the cost had been terrible. In a different way, the council has made its decision, Kelvash continued. Human territory will be declared a level 9 quarantine zone. All 200 star systems under human control will be sealed. No one will enter, no one will leave. Humanity will be isolated until such time as you prove you can be trusted with the power you possess. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species agreed, others looked uncomfortable. Chen Li finally moved. She stepped forward and her voice carried clearly through the vast space. You are making a mistake. We are preventing a catastrophe. Kelvos replied, you are creating one. Chen Li said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Humanity did not want this war. We did not want to create weapons that could tear at the fabric of reality. But when faced with extinction, we did what we had to do. You did more than survive. Another council member said. This one was a floating crystalline being that hummed when it spoke. You created weapons that frighten the entire galaxy. Weapons that make us question what is real and what is not. How many Andromedans died? We cannot know. How many ever existed? We cannot know. You have broken the rules of existence itself. Chen Li looked around the chamber. She saw fear in their eyes, in their postures, and the way they leaned away from her, even though she stood far below them. I understand your fear, she said quietly, but isolation will not make humanity less dangerous. It will not make us forget how to create these weapons. If anything, you are giving us time and reason to create more. That is a threat, Kelvo said sharply. That is a warning, Chen Li corrected. We did not ask for this isolation, but if you insist on it, we will make the most of it. When the barriers come down, and they will come down someday, you may not like what you find. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some demanded Chenny be removed immediately. Others called for even harsher measures, but Kelvos raised one clawed appendage, and silence fell. The decision is final, he declared. Human Ambassador Chen Li, you have one solar cycle to return to your territory. After that, the barriers will activate. Any human caught outside will be detained. Any ship attempting to cross will be destroyed. Chen Li nodded once. She did not bow, she did not plead. She simply turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silence outside the chamber. Captain Sarah Okonkwo waited by her ship. The Defiance Times was a human vessel, sleek and powerful, docked at the station's port. Sarah had been listening to the proceedings through her communication link. Her jaw was tight with anger. They actually did it, Sarah said as Chenli approached. They're locking us away like criminals. Yes, Chenli replied. She looked tired now, away from the council's eyes. And we have one day to get everyone home. Not everyone will make it, Sarah said. The reality of it struck her hard. Thousands of human ships were scattered across the galaxy. Traders, explorers, scientists, diplomats. They had one day to return to human space or be trapped outside forever. I know, Chenli said softly. Send the message. Emergency recall. All ships, all personnel. They need to start moving now. The message went out across the galaxy. Humanity had 24 hours. Some made it. Ships jumped through space at maximum speed, racing against the clock. Families were reunited. Colonies received their supplies just in time. But others were too far away. The math was simple and cruel. Some humans would not make it home. Sarah Okonkwo was one of them. The Defiance Times had been on a deep exploration mission when the trial concluded. By the time they received the recall message and calculated the jump, they had 18 hours. They needed 22. Sarah made the decision quickly. She pushed the engines beyond safe limits. She plotted jumps that risked tearing the ship apart. Her crew did not question her. They all knew what was at stake. They arrived at the border of human space with 4 minutes to spare. The barriers were already beginning to form. Sarah could see them on her sensors. Massive walls of energy spanning light years, surrounding all of human territory. Like a prison or a fortress. Full speed. Sarah ordered, we're going to make it. But the barriers activated early. Perhaps it was a malfunction. Perhaps Kelvash wanted to make a point. Either way, the walls of energy solidified 30 seconds too soon. The Defiance Times slammed into the barrier at full speed. Alarm screamed. The ship spun wildly. When it finally stabilized, they were on the outside. Sarah sat in her captain's chair, staring at the impenetrable wall between her and home. Beyond it, 200 star systems full of humans continued their lives. On this side, she and her crew of 40 were alone. What do we do now, Captain? Her first officer asked quietly. Sarah did not answer immediately. She looked at the barrier, then at her crew, then at the vast galaxy around them. Finally, she spoke. We survive, she said, and we remember, someday this barrier will come down. When it does, we'll be there too. See what humanity has become inside human space on Earth. In the capital city of New Geneva, people gathered in the streets. They watched the sky as the barriers completed their formation. The stars looked different now, dimmed by the energy walls that surrounded their entire civilization. Chenli stood on a balcony overlooking the crowds. Someone in the crowd shouted up to her, "What happens now?" Chenli considered the question, then she smiled, though it was not a happy expression. Now, she called back, we show them what happens when you give humanity 300 years alone with its imagination. The crowd did not cheer. They simply nodded and dispersed, returning to their homes and laboratories and factories. There was work to do, so much work above them. The barriers hummed with power, sealing humanity away from the galaxy. The quarantine had begun. 300 years passed in silence. Dr. Jurek stood before the barrier as she had done countless times before. Her 4 arms held scanning equipment that had cost more than a small planet's economy. The devices hummed and clicked, sending every type of signal known to science toward the energy wall. As always, nothing came back. Still nothing. Her assistant asked. The young scholar had only been working with for 5 years. He still had hope. Rix. Nothing. Confirmed. She was a Krell, a species known for patience and long memory. She had spent the last 70 years of her life studying the human quarantine. Her mentor had spent 60 years before that. Together, their work spanned more than a century, and they had learned almost nothing. The barrier revealed no secrets. It did not allow any scanning. It did not respond to any communication. Ships that got too close reported strange malfunctions, clocks that ran backward, compasses that pointed in impossible directions, crew members who swore they heard whispers in languages that had never been spoken. Why do you keep trying? The assistant asked. Zerix turned her large eyes toward him. Because someone must remember. The council wants to forget that humans ever existed. They are removing humanity from the historical records. In another century, most species will not even know they were here. It was true. The Galactic Council had been systematic in its eraser. Human achievements were now attributed to other species. Human discoveries were being forgotten. Human art and literature were being locked away in archives that few could access. The Council's official position was simple. Humanity had been a dangerous experiment that had failed. Better to move on, but Jurix could not move on. She had read the human texts before they were sealed. She had studied their history, their culture, their science. Humanity had been brilliant and flawed, creative and destructive, capable of both great beauty and terrible violence. They had been, in short, intensely interesting. What do you think happened to them? The assistant asked. Looked back at the barrier. I do not know. Perhaps they destroyed themselves with their own weapons. Perhaps they evolved into something we cannot recognize. Perhaps they simply live quiet lives on their worlds, content to be isolated. None of those options felt right to her, but she had no evidence for any other theory. Across the galaxy, War Marshal Taver had his own problems. He did not care about humanity or their mysterious silence. He cared about the void collective. They had appeared 50 years ago at the far edge of the galaxy. At first, they seemed like simple machines, automated ships with no crew, harvesting resources from dead worlds. But they were not simple. They were intelligent, adaptive and hungry. The void collective consumed everything. They landed on planets and stripped them bare, taking every molecule of useful matter they left behind. Perfectly smooth spheres of rock with no atmosphere, no water, no life. World after world fell to them, and they kept coming. Tor stood in his command center, watching the holographic display of the galaxy. Red markers showed void collective positions. There were hundreds of them now, spreading like infection across the map. His fleet had won some battles, but they were losing the war. We need new weapons, his tactical officer said. Our current technology cannot match their adaptive shielding. The research divisions are working on Tove replied, but his voice lacked confidence. The truth was that the galaxy had grown complacent, 300 years of peace following. Humanity's isolation had made the Council soft, military budgets had been cut, research into weapons had been discouraged. Now they were paying the price. There is another option, tactical officer said quietly. We could ask the Council to lift the human quarantine. If anyone could create weapons to fight the Void Collective, it would be humanity. Taver's scales bristled with agitation. The Council would never agree. They fear humanity more than they fear the Void Collective, even if it means losing worlds. Even then, the officer said nothing more, but Tor could see the doubt in his eyes. The War Marshal understood. He too wondered if the Council's fear had doomed them all. In the lower levels of the capital station, in places the Council members never visited, another group thought about humanity. They called themselves the Seekers of the Echo, though others called them a cult. Their leader was a being known only as the Prophet. No one knew her species or her true name. She wore robes that covered her completely, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humanity has not vanished, the Prophet told her. Followers, they gathered in a dim chamber lit only by candles. They have transcended. They have moved beyond physical form, beyond the limitations of matter and energy. They exist now in a higher state of being. The followers listened with reverence. There were hundreds of them from dozens of species, all united by their belief that humanity had achieved something miraculous. I hear their whispers, the Prophet continued. They speak to me in dreams. They tell me of wonders beyond imagination. They tell me that when the time is right, they will return and lift us all to their level of existence. Young follower raised her hand. But why do they not return now? Why do they leave us in darkness? We are not ready. The Prophet said simply, we cast them out. We feared their power. We must prove ourselves worthy before they will show us the truth. Not everyone believed the Prophet's words. Many considered the Seekers to be harmless fools. But their numbers grew each year, and with them the idea that humanity had become something more than mortal. Back at the barrier, J-Rix packed up her equipment. Another day of research had yielded nothing. As she prepared to leave, her instruments picked up something unusual. It was brief, lasting only a fraction of a second, but it was there, a response. She quickly recalibrated and tried. Again, nothing. She tried a third time. A fourth, a fifth, still nothing, but she had recorded that single moment, and as she analyzed it later in her laboratory, she felt a chill run through her body. The barrier had not reflected her signal. It had answered it. The response had been complex, layered with information she could not yet decipher. But one part was clear enough. It was a time stamp, not from 300 years ago, not from the present, but from thousands of years in the future. Time was moving differently inside the barrier. Sat in her laboratory for 3 days, checking and rechecking her calculations. Every analysis confirmed the same impossible truth. For every year that passed in the galaxy, decades were passing inside human space, perhaps centuries. She wrote a report and sent it to the Council. They dismissed it as instrument malfunction. They refused to investigate further. The official response was brief: human quarantine remains effect. No further study is required. But Jurix knew what she had discovered. While the galaxy had aged 300 years, humanity had aged far longer. What had they become in all that time? What had they built? What had they learned? She returned to the barrier again and again, trying to replicate that single moment of contact. She never succeeded, but she did notice something else. The barrier was changing. The energy readings were fluctuating in ways they had not before. The strange phenomena near the barrier, the time distortions, the impossible geometries were becoming more frequent. Something was happening inside human space, something big. One night Jrix had a dream. She stood before the barrier, and it was transparent. She could see through it too. The worlds beyond. What she saw made no sense. Structures that defied physics. Ships that moved without moving. Worlds that existed in multiple places at once. And humans, millions of them, billions of them, looking back at her with eyes that held the weight of ages. In the dream, one human stepped forward. He was tall and dark-skinned, wearing clothes that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. He smiled at her, and when he spoke, his voice was kind. "Thank you for remembering us," he said. "Soon you will see what we have become." Woke with a start, she immediately checked her instruments. The barrier readings were spiking wildly. Something was definitely happening. She sent an urgent message to the council. The barrier is destabilizing. Recommend immediate investigation. The council's response came 3 hours later. Noted, monitoring stations will observe. No action required. Noted, Jrix wanted to scream. She wanted to shake the council members and force them to see what was coming, but she was just one scientist, and they were the rulers of the galaxy. All she could do was watch and wait. The galaxy turned, indifferent to the concerns of one Krello researcher. The Void Collective continued its advance. The council continued its debates. The seekers of the echo continued their prayers, and behind the barrier, in the silence of 3,000 years of isolation, humanity prepared its response. The barriers fell. On a Tuesday, there was no warning, no announcement. One moment, the energy walls that had surrounded human space for 3 centuries were solid and impenetrable. The next moment, they simply weren't there anymore. Jrix was at her monitoring station when it happened. She had been watching the fluctuating readings all night, convinced something was about to occur, when her instruments suddenly showed empty space where the barrier had been. She thought they had malfunctioned. Run diagnostics. She ordered her assistant. Check everything, but the diagnostics came back clean. The instruments were working perfectly. The barrier was simply gone. Within minutes, alerts were sounding across the galaxy. Every monitoring station, every military outpost, every council facility that watched human space reported the same impossible thing. The quarantine had ended, not from outside, from within. The emergency council session was chaos. Representatives from all 47 species shouted over each other, demanding answers that no one had. Grand Arbiter Kelvesh X Vatum, descendant of the original Kelvos who had ordered the quarantine, tried to maintain order, but even his authority could not calm the panic. How is this possible? Someone demanded. The barriers were designed to last for millennia. They were powered by the combined resources of the entire galaxy. 80. Clearly humanity found a way to disable them, another voice said. or they waited for them to fail. Naturally, in only 300 years. Impossible, Drix had been summoned to the council chamber. She stood at the center of the assembly trying to explain what she had discovered. Honored council members, time moved differently inside the barrier for every year that passed. For us, decades passed. For humanity, perhaps centuries. They have not been isolated for 300 years. They have been isolated for 3,000 years, possibly more. Load, silence fell across the chamber. The council members looked at each other with growing horror. 3,000 years. Kelvash VII repeated slowly, what could they have become in 3,000 years? There is only one way to find out. Said, we must send a contact team. Council debated for hours. Some wanted to immediately re-establish the barriers, though no one knew how. Others wanted to send military forces. A few brave voices suggested peaceful contact. In the end, they agreed on a compromise. A small exploration team would enter human space. They would go to the nearest human system and attempt to make contact. If there was any sign of danger, they would retreat immediately. Volunteered to lead the team. She had spent her life studying humanity. If anyone could make sense of what they found, it would be her. The ship was called the Times Diplomatic Dawn. Asterisk. It was small, fast, and equipped with the best sensors the galaxy could produce. ZRI stood on the bridge with a crew of 20 representing 10 different species. They were scientists, linguists, and one very nervous military observer. Approaching the former barrier location, the pilot announced, no obstacles detected. We have a clear path to the nearest human system. That system was called Proxima. It had been a small human colony 300 years ago with only a few million inhabitants. The record showed 2 planets capable of supporting life. Small mining operation on the system's asteroid belt and basic orbital infrastructure. As the Times Diplomatic Dawn Times entered the system, felt her breathing quicken. Her instruments were showing readings that made no sense. There should be 2 habitable planets. She said slowly, I'm reading 17. Pilot echoed, that's impossible. You can't just create habitable planets. But the sensors did not lie. 17 worlds registered with breathable atmospheres, liquid water, and the electromagnetic signatures of civilization. Some of those worlds had not been habitable before humanity had changed them. And the asteroid belt, another crew member said, voice shaking, it's gone. There's a structure there instead. Jarek looked at the visual display. Where the asteroid belt should have been, there was instead a massive ring structure that encircled the entire system. It glowed with soft light, and it was clearly artificial. The scale of it defied comprehension. The ring was larger than any space station ever built by any species. It was larger than planets. What is that? Someone whispered before could answer. Her communication system activated. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with a warm human accent that had not been heard in 3 centuries. Unidentified vessel, this is Proxima System Control. Welcome to human space. We have been expecting you. Jurex exchanged glances with her crew. She activated her own communication system. This is Dr. Jurex of the Galactic Council Exploration Vessel Times Diplomatic Dawn Asterisk. We come in peace, seeking to re-establish contact with humanity. There was a Pause. Then the voice responded and thought she detected amusement in the tone. We know who you are, Doctor. We have been monitoring your research for quite some time. Please proceed to the coordinates we are transmitting. Delegation will meet you there. The coordinates appeared on her display. They pointed to the largest of the 17 planets, a blue and green world that hung in space like a jewel. Should we go? The military observer asked. Nervously, Jurix did not hesitate. Yes, we came here to make contact. Let's do that. As they approached the planet, they passed human ships, dozens of them. Hundreds. The vessels were elegant and strange, designed with aesthetic principles that seemed more like art than engineering. They moved without visible propulsion, gliding through space as if it offered no resistance. Those ships, the pilot said, I'm not reading any engines. How are they moving? I don't know, Ix admitted. She was beginning to understand how much humanity had changed. The planet's orbital space was even more shocking. Massive stations floated in perfect geometric patterns, structures that looked like flowers made of metal and crystal, opened and closed, catching sunlight, and everywhere thousands of ships moved in coordinated patterns that looked like a dance. Population reading. Someone called out, I'm showing this. Can't be right. What is it? 70 billion. On this one planet, but there's no crowding, no pollution, no resource strain. How is that possible? They landed at a spaceport that was larger than some cities. As the Time's diplomatic dawn times settled onto the designated pad, looked out the viewports and saw humans for the first time in 3 centuries. They looked the same, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, just as the old records showed, but there was something different about them, too. They moved with casual grace. They wore clothes that seemed to shift colors as they walked, and they all looked healthy, vibrant, without the wear that age usually brought. A delegation approached the ship. There were 5 humans, each dressed in formal attire that somehow managed to be both simple and magnificent. At the center of the group was a woman with dark skin and silver hair. She stood tall and confident, and her eyes held the depth of someone who had seen much. Activated the ship's external speakers. We greet you in the name of the Galactic Council. I am Dr. Leader of this expedition. The woman smiled. It was a warm expression, but Drix noticed it did not quite reach her eyes. Welcome, Dr. Jrix. I am Director Amara Akinquo, representative of the Human Concordant. We have much to discuss. Will you join us? Akono knew that name from her research. Captain Sarah Akinquo had been trapped outside the barrier when it fell. This woman was likely her descendant. Jrix made her decision. She turned to her crew. Doctor, I must protest. The military observer began. Noted, Zurich said as she stepped onto the planet's surface. She was struck by how comfortable it felt. The gravity was perfect. The air was clean and fresh. Even the lighting seemed calibrated for optimal visibility. Everything about this place had been designed with care. Director Akono approached and extended her hand. Jrix knew the gesture from her studies. A human handshake, a sign of greeting. She took the offered hand with one of her own. Thank you for coming, Akono said. We know this must be disorienting. For you, that is an understatement. Jrix replied. What happened here? How did you accomplish all of this? Akono's smile turned sad. You gave us 3,000 years alone, Doctor. 3,000 years with no outside contact, no trade, no cultural exchange. We had nothing to do but look inward and push forward, so we did. We solved problems. We advanced our science. We built a society that could thrive in isolation. 3,000 years, Jurix repeated. The time dilation was real, very real. The barrier did not just seal us in, it changed how time flowed for us. We suspect it was not intentional on the council's part, but the result was profound. Another human stepped forward. A young man who looked barely 20, but his eyes suggested he was much older. We have a message for the Galactic Council, he said. Would you like to hear it? Nodded, unable to speak. Akono's expression became serious. Tell the Council this: we received your quarantine, we accepted your judgment, and we have prepared our response. Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled. Representatives who rarely attended were present. The gallery was packed with observers from 100 different species. Everyone wanted to hear what humanity had to say. Ambassador Marcus Chen Okonkwo stood at the center of the chamber, in the same spot where his ancestor Chen Li had stood 3 centuries ago. He was young, perhaps 30, in appearance, with dark skin and calm eyes. He wore a simple suit that seemed to shimmer slightly as if made from liquid light. Grand Arbiter Kelvesh XV8 called the session to order. His voice was less steady than his ancestors had been. The council recognizes the human delegation. You may speak. Marcus bowed slightly. Thank you, Grand Arbiter. 300 years ago, my ancestor stood in this chamber and warned you about isolating humanity. You did not listen. Today I stand here to explain what your decision created. He gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. They showed images of human space, the 17 planets of Proxima, the massive ring structures, the thousands of ships, the billions of inhabitants living in prosperity. This is what 3,000 years of isolation looks like, Marcus said. While you experience 3 centuries, we experience 3 millennia. Every human alive today has ancestors who lived their entire lives knowing they would never see another alien species. Generations were born and died behind your barrier. The chamber was silent. Even those who had wanted to interrupt found themselves unable to speak. We did not waste that time, Marcus continued. We could not explore the galaxy, so we explored other frontiers. We pushed the boundaries of science, of technology, of what it means to be human. We had to. Our survival depended on it. Another gesture brought new images. These showed technologies that made the council members lean forward in disbelief. Ships that moved faster than light, without using conventional drives. Devices that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Medical technology that had extended human lifespan to hundreds of years. Energy sources that seemed to violate thermodynamics. We also learned about the Void Collective, Marcus said. Quietly, we have been watching them through the barrier for 50 years. We know they pose a threat to the entire galaxy. War Marshal Tavri stood abruptly. You have been watching. Why did you not contact us? Because we could not, Marcus replied. The barrier prevented all communication. But we have been analyzing the Void Collective, studying their patterns, understanding their nature, and we have found a solution. The chamber erupted in voices. Marcus waited patiently for silence to return. You claim to have solved the void collective threat, Kelvos Ith. Asked, disbelief clear in his tone. Our best military minds have been unable to slow their advance. That is because you are fighting them with conventional weapons, Marcus said. The void collective are not truly machines. They are artificial intelligences operating on principles fundamentally different from organic thought. They adapt to physical attacks, but we have developed technology that attacks their decision-making processes directly. He shared technical data with the council's systems. Scientists in the gallery immediately began analyzing it. Within minutes, excited whispers spread through the chamber. This is revolutionary, someone called out. If this works, it could neutralize the void collective completely. It does work, Marcus said. Simply, we have tested it extensively in simulations. We are prepared to implement it immediately. But there are conditions. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone knew this moment was coming. Humanity offers to save the galaxy from the void collective, Marcus said. In exchange, we require the following. First, humanity must be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. Second, the historical records must be corrected. Our contributions to galactic civilization must be properly acknowledged. Third, humanity must be granted veto power over any future quarantine decisions. Veto power, Kelvesh II sputtered. That is unprecedented. No single species has such authority. No single species was ever quarantined for 3,000 years. Marcus replied calmly. We are not asking for control of the council. We are asking for assurance that what happened to us will never happen to any species again. The right to isolate an entire civilization should not be easy. It should require consensus, not simple majority. Debate that followed was fierce. Some council members wanted to accept humanity's terms immediately. Others argued that humanity was blackmailing them. Still others questioned whether humanity's solution would actually work. During a recess, Jurix approached Marcus in a private meeting room. You knew we would come, she said. When the barrier fell, you were ready for us. How? Marcus smiled. Dr. Jurix, we have been monitoring your research for decades. Your dedication to understanding us did not go unnoticed. To answer your question, we developed predictive models during our isolation. We could not see outside the barrier, but we could calculate probabilities. We knew eventually someone would enter space, and we knew who it would most likely be. You planned all of this. We had 3,000 years to plan, Marcus said. That is a long time to prepare for a single conversation. Sat down heavily. What have you become? The humans I studied in the archives were brilliant but reckless. You seem different, colder, more calculated. Isolation changes the species, Marcus said, and for the first time Drix heard sadness in his voice. We did not want to become this. We wanted to explore the galaxy, make friends, learn from other cultures. Instead, we were forced to turn inward. We had to become self-sufficient, resilient, powerful, enough that we would never be vulnerable again. That transformation came at a cost. What cost? Marcus looked out the window at the council station. We lost our innocence. Every human child grows up learning about the quarantine, about the day the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to exist alongside them. That changes you. It makes you careful. It makes you plan for every possibility. It makes you strong, but it also makes you lonely. The session resumed. The council voted. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity's terms were accepted. Within a week, human ships began deploying throughout the galaxy. They carried devices that Marcus called cognitive disruptors. The technology was elegant and terrifying. It did not destroy the void collective machines, it simply made them unable to make decisions. The machines continued to exist, but they became inert, drifting harmlessly through space. World after world was saved. The void collective's advance stopped completely. Within a month, the threat that had menaced the galaxy for 50 years was neutralized, but not everyone was grateful. Several species who had refused humanity's help, initially preferring to maintain their independence, found themselves facing void collective attacks with no defense. Some of them sent desperate calls for aid. Humanity responded, saving them despite their earlier refusal. Others, too proud or too fearful, did not call. Those worlds fell. In the council chamber, a representative from one of the lost worlds addressed the assembly. "You let this happen," she accused. "You could have saved us, but you let humanity dictate terms while our worlds burned." Marcus stood to respond, but Kelvos XV spoke first. Humanity offered help freely to all who accepted their terms. Your government chose to refuse. That choice had consequences. We refused because we feared them. The representative shouted. And we were right to fear them. Look at what they have become. They have technology we cannot comprehend. They have power we cannot match. They are not our equals. They are our superiors. And now they have leverage over the entire galaxy. The chamber filled with uncomfortable murmurs. The representative had said what many were thinking. Marcus waited for silence. Then he spoke quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. You are right to fear us. We are powerful. We have capabilities that most species will not develop for thousands of years, but fear is what created this situation. Fear is what led to our quarantine. Fear is what prevented us from being the partners we wanted to be. He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. Humanity does not want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it. We want to learn from it. We want to be part of it, but we will never again allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We will never again allow fear to be used as justification for our isolation. If that makes us frightening, then so be it. We would rather be feared and free than loved and imprisoned. Later that day, Zeatrix found Marcus on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. You gave them a speech about not wanting to rule, she said, but you are ruling. You make them comply through the power you hold. We give them choices. Marcus corrected. We offer help, but we do not force it. Those who accept our terms receive our aid. Those who refuse are free to face their challenges alone. Is that so different from how the galaxy operated before? It is different when one species has all the power. Marcus sighed. Dr. Jurek, in all your studies of humanity, did you ever read about a concept called responsibility? With power comes responsibility. We know this. We have 3,000 years of cultural development that drilled this lesson into every aspect of our society. We are not using our power carelessly. We are using it to help because we Remember what it felt like to be helpless. Jurix wanted to believe him. But she also remembered the warning Chen Li had given 300 years ago. Humanity had promised that isolation would change. They had kept that promise. Galaxy would never be the same. 5 years after the barrier fell, the galaxy looked different. The new Unity Station replaced the old Council orbital. It was a human design built with input from all member species. The structure was elegant, incorporating architectural styles from dozens of cultures. It floated in neutral space, equidistant from the territories of the major powers. This was meant to symbolize the new era of cooperation, but symbols and reality were not always the same thing. Dr. Jurek walked through the station's corridors, heading to yet another meeting. In 5 years, she had become one of the Galactic Assembly's most important figures. Her knowledge of humanity made her invaluable as a bridge between the old galaxy and the new order. But the work was exhausting. She entered a conference room where Ambassador Marcus waited. He looked exactly as he had 5 years ago. Jerks had learned that modern human medical technology essentially stopped aging. Marcus could look 30 for centuries if he chose. Dr. Jurix. Marcus greeted her warmly. Thank you for coming. We need to discuss the Outer Rim situation. The Outer Rim was where 3 species had refused all human contact. They maintained their independence, their old technologies, their old ways, and they were struggling without access to the advances humanity freely shared with cooperative species. They fell further behind each year. They still refuse aid, Jurix asked. They do. But their population is suffering. Medical crisis we could solve in minutes take them months. Resource shortages we could eliminate persist. Their leadership blames us for their problems. Are you responsible? Marcus considered the question carefully. We are responsible for making help available. We are not responsible for their refusal to accept it. Every species has the right to choose their own path, even if that path leads to hardship, but you could help them. Anyway, you have the power. We have the power, yes. But forcing help on those who refuse it is not help, it is conquest. We learned many things in our isolation, Dr. Jarek. One of them was respect for autonomy. We will not become the dictators the galaxy feared we might be. A chime interrupted them. Communication was incoming from Earth. Marcus accepted it, and a holographic figure appeared. It was Director Akinquo. Though she was now officially retired, she looked older than Marcus, though still healthy and vibrant. Marcus, I wanted you to hear this from me first. Akinquo said, we found her. We found Captain Sarah Akono. Jurix felt a shock run through her. She knew the story. Sarah had been trapped outside the barrier when it fell along with her crew for 300 years. They had lived in the galaxy while humanity experienced 3,000 years behind the barrier. Then, when the barrier fell, humanity had searched for her. Every human ship carried her description, her last known coordinates, her genetic signature. She's alive, Marcus asked, hope clear in his voice. She is. Her ship was found in the outer Perseus arm in a small colony that had sheltered them. She is very old, Marcus, over 300 years old. Her crew has died over the centuries, but she survived, and she wants to come home. She wants to come home. The journey to retrieve Captain Sarah took 2 weeks. Marcus insisted on leading. The delegation himself, J-Rix, asked to come along. She had studied Sarah's logs, her final transmission before the barrier trapped her outside. She wanted to meet this woman who had lived through history. The colony was small, barely a million inhabitants, from a species called the Terrain. They were kind people who had welcomed the stranded humans centuries ago, giving them homes and accepting them into their communities. Sarah Okonkwo had lived among them all this time, working as a teacher, a historian, and a keeper of human memory. When they arrived, Sarah was waiting at the spaceport. She looked ancient by human standards. Her skin lined with age, her hair completely white, her movements slow, but her eyes were sharp and bright. Marcus approached her, and Jarrett saw tears on his face. Captain Okonkwo, my name is Marcus Chen Okonkwo. I am the great-great-grandson of Ambassador Chen Li. On behalf of all humanity, I welcome you home. Sarah smiled. I never thought I would see another human again. You all look so young, so healthy. What happened to us while I was gone? And everything, Marcus said softly. Everything happened on the journey back to human space. Sarah listened to the story of the last 3,000 years. She asked questions, made observations, and sometimes just sat quietly, processing information. Jurix watched her carefully, fascinated by this woman, who was a living bridge between the old humanity and the new. Finally, Sarah asked the question Jarek had been waiting for. Are we the monsters they feared we would become? Marcus did not answer immediately. I don't know, he admitted. We are powerful, we are careful, we are distant in ways the old humanity was not, but we are also still human. We still feel, we still care, we still want to do good. Does that make us monsters or guardians? Those are not opposites, Sarah said quietly. Sometimes they are the same thing. When they reached Earth, the celebration was massive. Billions watched as Captain Sarah Okonkwo, the last human of the old galaxy, returned home, but Sarah herself seemed uncomfortable with the attention. She asked for privacy, and it was granted. In a private meeting, Sarah spoke with the leadership of the human concorded. Shrix was allowed to attend. As an observer, I need you to understand something, Sarah said to the assembled leaders. I lived in the galaxy while you were isolated. I saw how other species lived, how they thought, how they feared you, and I need to tell you, they were not wrong to be afraid. The room fell silent. The weapons we used in the Andromedan War were terrifying. Sarah continued, I know that I was there. I saw what they did, but what you have become is more frightening in a different way. You are not violent, you are not cruel, but you are overwhelming. When you offer help, it comes with conditions. When you share technology, it creates dependency. When you act, the galaxy has no choice but to react. You have become exactly what they feared. Species so powerful that everyone else must orbit around you. Marcus listened carefully. What would you have us do differently? I don't know, Sarah admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe this is what we had to become to survive, but I wanted someone to say it out loud. Power and good intentions do not automatically make you the good guys. Her words spread through human society like ripples in water. They sparked debates, reflections, and changes in policy. Humanity began actively working to reduce dependency, to share technology without strings, to step back where possible. It was not a complete transformation, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Drix published her final work. It was a comprehensive history of humanity from their arrival in the galaxy to the present day. She called it The Species Who Learned Alone. The book became required reading in schools across the galaxy. It explained not just what humanity had done, but why. It explored the psychology of isolation, the evolution of their culture, and the lessons their story held for everyone. In her conclusion, wrote, humanity is neither hero nor villain, they are what we made them. When we locked them away, we created the conditions for their transformation. They became powerful because they had to. They became careful because they remembered being vulnerable. They became distant because they learned that the galaxy would turn on them when frightened. If we fear what they have become, we must accept our role in creating it. The book won acclaim from some and criticism from others, but everyone read it, everyone talked about it, and slowly the galaxy began to understand. 2 years later, the Galactic Assembly faced a crisis. A new threat emerged from beyond the galactic rim, a wave of radiation that would sterilize dozens of worlds if it could not be stopped. The Assembly turned to humanity for help. Marcus stood before them and surprised everyone by saying, "We cannot solve this alone. Solution requires knowledge we do not possess, resources we do not have, and perspectives we cannot provide. We propose a collaborative effort. Human technology, Krell's scientific expertise, terrain environmental knowledge, and contributions from any species willing to help. No conditions, no requirements, just cooperation." The galaxy came together. Species who had barely spoken to each other worked side by side with humans. They shared information, combined technologies, and created solutions none of them could have reached alone. When the radiation wave was finally stopped, the celebration belonged to everyone. Found Marcus afterward on an observation deck, watching ships from a 100 species depart for their homes. "You let them share the victory," she observed. "It was their victory as much as ours." Marcus replied, "We are powerful, Doctor, but we are not all powerful. We still need the galaxy. We still need friends, partners, and perspectives different from our own. 3,000 years of isolation taught us many things, but it could not teach us what we had lost: the richness of diversity, the strength of cooperation, the joy of discovering something new from someone different." So what happens now? Marcus smiled. Now we explore, now we learn. We do what we always wanted to do before we were locked away. We go out into the galaxy, not as saviors or overlords, but as curious members of a vast, strange, beautiful community. Below them, a fleet of ships prepared for departure. They were exploration vessels heading for the furthest reaches of the galaxy. Their crews were mixed humans working alongside Krell, Tin, and dozens of other species. They would search for new worlds, new civilizations, new knowledge. At the helm of the lead ship was Captain Sarah Okonkwo. Humanity had offered her the finest medical treatments, technologies that could restore her youth and extend her life for centuries. She had accepted some of the treatments, but not all. She wanted to live naturally, she said, for however long she had left, and she wanted to spend that time doing what she had always done, exploring. As the fleet jumped to faster than light speeds and vanished into the cosmos, Jurix felt something she had not felt in years. Hope, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy itself. They had all survived the quarantine. Humanity had survived by growing stronger. The galaxy had survived by learning to adapt. And now, together they could face whatever came. Next on Earth, in the archives of human history, someone added a new entry to Ambassador Chen Li's famous final words below her warning about isolation. They wrote she was right. We became something different, but we also became something necessary. The question was never whether the galaxy would accept us. The question was whether we would accept ourselves, power and all responsibility and all fear and all we did. And now the real work begins. Galaxy turned as it always had, but now it turned with humanity as part of its rhythm, not separate from it. The quarantine was over. The isolation had ended. The barriers had fallen, and in their place was something new, something uncertain, something like a future they could build